Okay, we're going to take the screen out of an HP dv7 6000 series on this one. For a bonus, you're also going to see what happens when something gets broken while you're doing it, and I'll tell you how to fix it. So we've got a broken screen here. The first thing we're going to do, we're going to make sure the machine's unplugged, make sure the battery's out. You don't want any power at all on the machine. You can do permanent damage to it. The first thing, in order to get the screen out, we're going to have to take the bezel out. On this unit, there's two little, almost invisible black plastic doohickeys that are right down here on the lower right and the lower left. The best way to get those things off is to get your fingernail underneath them. That's what they look like. The best way to get them off is to get your fingernail underneath them. I don't think any tool does any better. You could try a spudger or something like that. I wouldn't use anything metal on them, and you just really have to be careful you don't tear them up. So underneath there's going to be a screw. We'll get that out. I've already got the screw out on this side, but you'll have to take both of those out. Once you've got the two screws out, then you can use a spudger if you're doing this for the first time, but I find that the easiest way to do it is to just get my fingernails under the inside edge over on this left-hand side and start popping these things off. If you can't get that started, you can try it over here. And usually it's best to start it from the inside, I find. Once you get the inside popped, you'll get a little bit of a gap over here, and you can start working it back and forth, and that's how you get the whole thing off. So that's coming off pretty nicely. That's popping off. You can break these connectors here, so don't manhandle them, but just kind of try to work them. And that I'm just pushing a little bit up on that, and it snaps out. Now, it gets a little bit harder when you get down towards the bottom here, because you got to get these things off, and they don't want to come, these hinge covers don't want to come off of there very easily, and you'll see what's going to happen on mine. Oh, yeah, and then to get this bottom part off, I just run my hand along this bottom, and that snaps most of those things, and you can kind of work that. The bottom's kind of the hardest, but you just have to work it until it feels like it's going to come loose. Once you get that corner loose, then you can pop this thing out. There we go. Okay. And you can see in my case what's happened is the hinge cover has broken off the inside of the bezel. What I'm going to have to do here to get this thing back on, I won't show you that, but I'll tell you about it. It just plugs in here, and I'm going to use some hot glue to hot glue this back in. And once you get a little hot glue in there, that'll stay forever, and you'll be in good shape. Don't try to use your super glue. It won't stick to this kind of plastic. So now the next thing I usually do is I usually loosen these screws down here just a little bit, maybe one turn or so. One turn on those, one turn on these over here. There we go. And that's going to allow the hinges to kind of come forward, and the whole thing, the hinges to come forward and release from the lid. We've got two screws up here at the top that we've got to take out all the way. These screws at the bottom, just one turn is really all you need to get on those. These ones are coming out all the way. And then that'll start to release the hinges. Now I've already taken the screws out. There's 4 screws on both sides of this. I've got a couple left in here. You're going to have to take these 4 screws out, and then that'll release the screen from the hinge entirely. The hardest screw usually to get out is this bottom one down here, right there, because it's really close to the lid. But once you get him out, and you might have to fiddle with the hinge a little bit to do that, once you get him out, the screen is free from the hinges. Now, be careful, it's still connected. You can just bring that thing down. Now, I've already been into mine, so I've cheated here a little bit. But what you'll have now, here's where the video cable connects into the screen. You're not too worried about these electronics on the old one. You do have to worry about them on the new one. Be gentle with them. This one I'm not too worried about. I've got this is my video cable. It's taped in and taped down back here. I want to be sure not to break this. If you break the video cable, you got big problems. So you don't want to do that. So what I do is I'll hold down on here, and I'll get my fingernail started underneath this tape. On this unit, I have 2 pieces of tape for some reason. We've got a belt and suspenders. All you need to do, this tape is really strong, is peel it up along the edges, peel it up as far as it goes up to the cable, Then you peel this one up as far as you can get it up to the cable. Peel it up here, and that'll start to expose. Now I'm still holding down the cable, and that'll expose the connector here. Now, before you pull the connector out, you're going to have to pull the tape up back here. So again, stick my finger on here, and I pull this tape because the video cable is taped to the screen. I pull that up so it's not sticking, and I'm trying to be as careful as I can. I do not want to stress this connector here. So once I've got this kind of up, mostly, I've got all this tape up, then you can see with the connector here, here's the part that goes, oops, I got my tape in the way still. Hold on, let's get this tape out of the way. There we go. Okay, there we go. So here's the connector on the screen, and just over here, here's the connector on the video cable. There's a little gap between them that I'm going to get my thumbnails in on both sides, and I'm just going to work that connector out. There we go. And eventually it'll pop out. You want to try not to bring it out at too much of an angle. I brought it out at a pretty good angle there, but not too much of an angle. Try to get both sides coming out so that it comes out straight, and then that's released. Once that's off, screen's done. Okay, screen's out, and it's time to put in a new one. Okay, now we are ready to reinstall the new screen. I've hot glued my bezel here. Hopefully that'll hold together so I'm not embarrassed on the video. Here's the new screen. Usually I leave the plastic in place here so that we don't damage the screen. It's possible to, if you clip it with something sharp, to scratch it, so we don't want to do that. I've pulled some of the tape off of the connector, not all of it. I've still got a little bit of a tail here. I'm going to use that for some forward force on this. This really is probably about the hardest part of the job, and you just hope it goes well, and if it does, it's a thing of beauty. What I usually do is I try to give it a little bit of force from behind and a little bit of force on this on the tape to pull it, but mainly use my fingernail to plug it in there, and as you see, it just popped into place. Don't force it, just be gentle with it, wiggle it in a little bit. You can damage this thing, so just treat it gingerly, but when you get it lined up perfectly and you feel like you do, it should just slide right in. Now I'm going to use some packing tape here because it's what I have on hand, and it works just fine for this, to hold this into place. Now remember that these electronics, down where it says do not touch, they are sensitive, so you don't want to push too hard on that, but this tape will hold us in place just fine, I think. Okay, now we're just going to undo the steps that we did previously. Try not to touch the screen and get our fingers on it. I'm going to slide him back up into place. There we go. And there we go along the edge. So that's in. Now, basically what I want to do is I want to try to get a couple screws in here in the top of the unit, and then that'll make all the rest of the screws go in a lot easier. Oops, missed it. Once you get it lined up, okay, now you're laughing. Okay, so I've got my top screw in there, and let's see if we can get our top screw in over here too. Okay, now we're pretty good. All right, so now this is the point in the project where I'd like to do a little bit of testing. So I'm going to go ahead and put the battery back in. Oops. There we go. And I just want to make sure the screen lights up. Now, if you do what I just did, just make sure that you grab these hinges underneath here, because I did not screw them in yet. There we go. And okay, there we've got a screen. All right, I don't know if you can see that on the video, but you press escape for startup menu. Okay, that's good. So, now I'm going to turn it back off. Pop the battery back out and finish the job. Remember, we got to pull these up here because we didn't screw those in. And the reason I do the testing there is because if something's horribly wrong, now's the time to know it before you put the whole thing back together again. All right, there we go. Now we're going to have to pull this off before we put the bezel back on. So, now, all we have to do is get the bezel back on. We have to make sure that the cable is out of the way here. All right. And I just tilted these hinges back in there. And then I usually start at the top, popping it back in. Okay, that needs to be popped a little bit more, but I'll do that after I screw it in. Okay, so we're just about done. 2 more screws to go, and then the little black pieces, and you're finished. Get that one in there. Okay, and then the last part you do is get these things back on here. Sometimes there'll be enough sticky. In my case, there's a knot on that one. I've got enough sticky stuff on this one, so I'll put him on there. And generally, you can get it in with your finger. Again. Sometimes you need a spudger to kind of move it into place. There you go. And I'll put some rubber cement on the back of this one, put him back in, and then you're good to go. That's it.